absolute gold. Um,
Okay.
all right.
Sorry to interrupt, but now would be a good time to get started again and redo whatever you just did.
I was just sharing all of your awesomeness and you completely missed it.
I know. That's why I was highly triggered, because I knew that I was missing out on my awesomeness. And I was like, wait,
All right, maybe
this
we
is
can work on that for you
really
today.
emotionally hard on me. So I had to speak up.
Amazing. All right, well, let's start again. Welcome everybody to episode two of Naked TV, where we are stripping back the BS and getting raw about real topics. And I can tell you, we have some really juicy topics lined up and some incredible coaches and mentors over the coming weeks. And I'm really excited to be kicking this off with today's interview and bringing you one of my favorite humans in the world, you, Nima. Do you feel special? Nima is a personal friend and mentor who has guided me through what felt like one of the most catastrophic moments of my life, which obviously I have grown through that, and Nima helped me really navigate that moment with a lot of grace and ease, and helped me cultivate some beautiful gifts and lessons from that. So today's topic is about becoming trigger-proof and learning how to consciously regulate our state. Many of us go through life thinking that it is external forces that are responsible for how we choose to react to life and circumstances. And Nima, you're really helping people to take back their power and helping them to understand that they really get to influence their own state and how they choose to respond to life. And I know for me, this has really helped me up-level all areas of my life, including my relationships, my parenting, my relationship with myself, my health, and of course, my business as well. So I think one of the greatest gifts that you've given me over the past few years is really refining my ability to self-reflect through my triggers and use them as a mirror to something that is happening internally, or a message that something needs to be changed, something needs to be healed, and using that as an opportunity for healing and to shift into my higher self. So maybe you can start. You've just been the greatest gift to me, and I would love for you to start by sharing a little bit about your story and what brought you to work with people in this field and why you're so passionate about helping people become trigger-proof.
Thanks for that little intro. I'm glad I can hear you. I was like sitting there going, okay, so how was like, oh, maybe I should just speak up. And the reason why I'm teaching this is because I suck at it. Essentially, I was, you know, I was raised looking externally, having to feel like I had to perform for love, for approval, having these deep desires, but having those desires for what I wanted to do with my life, the sensation of feeling them invalidated by my parents, and that conundrum of choosing, what I authentically wanted to do from that and what I would please my parents. And so being Persian, growing up in a Persian household, being raised Canadian, I had one foot in Canada culture and the other foot in kind of fitting into religious and societal upbringing, familial systems. And this conundrum created a split in my psyche, combined with a separation trauma when I was 2 years old, which had me not with separation from my mother for about 3 months, which had me showing up in my relationships completely wounded and seeking the external validation of women, however, not trusting in it. And so feeling that it was going to be taken away and abandoned, just like that little 2-year-old inside. So essentially, I became a player. One woman was never enough. And even when I was married, I really had this issue where I was showing up as kind of like avoidantly attached, deeply wanting that connection, but pushing it away because I didn't trust it. And it took me going through my career as a chiropractor, helping people with stress related problems, to kind of put this link together that, wow, I'm going through relationship issues, going through a divorce, while at the same time seeing a correlation with the health of my patients being kind of dismantled, the health kind of falling apart on the other side of conflict. That I had this little epiphany. Wait a second. There's a direct impact between our health, our well-being, stress, the way that our physiology functions, and emotional wounding from conflict in relationships. I saw this correlation. It was unmistakable. I couldn't ignore it anymore. So as I continued to heal my own attachment wounds, I was unknowingly creating a methodology which I could help my patients. And that was 12 years ago. I started creating these little workshops in my office called Life Skills for a Stressful World. And now, fast forward 10 years, 12 years, I teach people how to emotionally regulate their how to regulate their nervous systems so that they can create secure attachments in their lives, connect to their purpose, heal relationships, and deepen intimacy. Because instead, if we don't learn those skills, we have breakdowns in relationships and existential crisis, low self-worth, low self-esteem, low value of self, unable to connect to purpose, and then our relationships fall apart, and then our health falls apart, not knowing that it's all part of the same upstream journey. So now I teach people how to master their nervous systems internally, as within, so as without, so that their relationships can transform. And not only am I the president, I'm also a client. 2 years ago, after my last breakup, I delved completely deep into this work. This is around the time when you and I met, and I started to emerge these new, deeply somatic tools to help heal those old attachment wounds. And I healed with my parents, and I said, I don't care whatever it takes, what distance I have to travel. I want to learn the most important skill, which is to have healthy relationships. And if I could do this, maybe whatever it takes, I want to create a secure relationship. And so within a short period of time, I met the right person. And now we have a family and a beautiful 6-month-old. And now I teach others how to create secure relationships by mastering themselves.
I love that. And I love your just authenticity that you suck at it. Because I think as human beings, it's innate that we have this challenge. And
That's
the goal,
that's my main motive
yeah,
of teaching.
mine
My
too.
main motive of teaching it is, look, the reason why this is important to me to teach is because I had the biggest problem with this growing up. I
Yeah.
had the biggest problem with this in my relationships. It's like the alcoholic becoming
Mhm.
an addictions counselor. It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah. Well, you can relate, right? So you become the best coach when you've been through it
Yeah.
yourself. And I think all humans are, moving through it at their own journey. And I'm not sure that, and just to set the scene and tone for everyone, I'm not sure that it's possible to ever become completely trigger proof. If you are real and a human being, that probably will not happen in this lifetime. But what you can do is really master inner pause and reflection, and
Totally.
become more conscious on how you choose to respond to different circumstances.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you. The first thing I want you to know is trigger proof doesn't mean trigger less. I
Yeah.
want to really distinguish. I get triggered. Triggered is a nervous system activation based on a past event. What's different now is that these triggers don't take me out and cause me to have conflict internally and externally, which take me out of my game, right?
Yeah.
I'm able to take those and now integrate them, and to get into my heart, and to use that activation instead of to avoid, to actually pause and to
Mhm.
feel and to alchemize that into deeper self-love. And when you do this right, you can take a conflict with anybody and turn it into deeper intimacy. And these two
Mhm.
skills are probably the most important skills never taught to us, that completely transform our self-esteem, our
Mm-hmm.
relationship within ourselves, our health, and then our sense of calmness, our sense of inner peace, which then translates into
Mm.
creating a secure state within ourselves, which then creates a container so that secure relationships can thrive.
Yeah.
We're waiting for somebody on the outside to fill that. But what I've discovered is when I became that within myself, boom, for the first time in my life at the age of 44,
Mm-hmm.
44, I was able to have a secure relationship with my team, my
Mm-hmm.
clients. I'm not codependent on clients.
Yeah.
I'm not codependent on relationships, friendships. There's this deep sense of security and calmness and self-trust that
Mm-hmm.
comes on the other side of that, but it's never trigger proof. Excuse me,
Yeah.
trigger less.
Yes, I love that. And you shared beautifully from a male perspective how that transpired in your life when you didn't feel those secure attachments because you didn't feel that secureness within yourself. And,
Hmm.
as a woman, the way I find that it generally plays out is I truly believe that, especially if you're a mother, a woman's state is the most influential in the home. And so the state that the woman is in generally tends to flow into affecting the children as
The
well
whole
as the
family.
partner, the whole family. So our state drives the state of the whole family. And I'll
Totally.
never forget when the children's father said to me in my past relationship, the kids are tiptoeing around you. And that was the biggest gift. It was like a sledgehammer wake up call because
Ouch.
I remember that feeling as a child and I didn't want my children to feel that way. And I knew it was the truth. And I knew that I was the one that was responsible for creating that state.
Hmm.
And that my internal suffering and anxiety and lack of security in myself was not only flowing into the children, that energy, but also that was what I was modeling to them. And so
Totally.
even before it was for myself, it was really for them that I realized I had to get my shit together. And
It's totally true.
yeah, and you move to this state of commitment where you become more committed to building connection and trust and resourcefulness and freedom in
Than
yourself and
being
your
right.
relationships than being right, than being a victim to your past, being a victim to your suffering, and yeah, like you said, being right. And
Yeah.
when you move to that state of, you know what, I am more committed to my freedom and my joy and beautiful relationships, that's when you really can make that
Mhm.
huge leap forward into creating change.
Totally. Totally.
So,
Your state does. I just wanted to jump into about that. Your state as a mother, see what happens is when you are dysregulated in your emotions and the kids are tiptoeing around you, they don't have the ability because you're feeling a lack of self-trust, you're judging yourself, blaming. It's all because you're judging yourself. You're
yeah.
unhappy with how something's going on the outside. You turn around unconsciously, make an interpretation that you're not good enough
Mm-hmm.
or you're a failure, and that causes you to be the type of person that dysregulated that others have to tiptoe around. The children don't look and go, poor mom, she's totally dysregulated. She's been triggered. A past event has come up for her, and I really want to hold space for her. And because it's not about me, it's all about her. It's not what they say.
Yeah.
What they say is, it must be because I'm bad. And that unconsciously fuels their own unworthiness. And this is how unconsciously intergenerational trauma, and this is just a small example, how it then passes to the next generation
Mm-hmm.
until the person puts their hand up and says, I'm going to be the one to break the cycle as you have.
Yeah.
And so kudos, but that's really what it's all about. And the context here is that if you don't make this a priority, it gets passed down to the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if your parents made it a priority to invest in
Mm-hmm.
learning how to master their own nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we both, have learnt a lot from our past relationships and what we've had to grow through to get to where we are today. And for me, one of those major lessons and what was driving my, state of anxiety and frustration and reactivity, which I think is something that a lot of women feel challenged with when they're raising kids, was that sense of not feeling enough, not feeling complete and whole and happy in myself, and therefore projecting that responsibility to complete me and fill that hole onto like my partner, most of all, more than my children. Some women do it to their project that to their children more, but for me it was that constant expectation, heavy expectation. When you place the expectation on your partner in your life to be the driving sole force of your happiness, not only will you constantly feel let down, but you place such an incredible amount of pressure on that person, because it's impossible for them to make you feel whole. So they're always going to fail. And as we know, men don't like the feeling of failure. So that is one way to ruin your relationship.
Yeah, totally.
So let's make this practical. And maybe we could dive into sort of, I'll keep an eye on the chat if anyone has a practical scenario they would love us to chat about. But one thing, if I reflect on previous relationships, is that feeling that of reactivity, of feeling like you're not bringing out the best in each other, and feeling like you're tiptoeing around each other and not being in control of that emotional state. Perhaps you could just talk a little more on a practical level of the challenges people might be facing in their relationships, and then how they can, what's one thing they can start doing today to move towards a more trigger-proof state of being.
Essentially, we first have to start off with the understanding the context of what a relationship really is about. If we want to change our relationships, it's not going to be done by talking about the content within it. He's a narcissist, she's a narcissist, he does this, he does that, I feel abandoned. These are all content questions. What we do when we help our clients completely transform their relationships around is we just go after the context. In other words, the wounds that we're leading from. The only way, see what happens when we get triggered, it's these unconscious motives. We all have conscious and unconscious motives getting into relationships, and we don't even know what they are. And so we start off not knowing that the reason why we get into these relationships in the first place is because we feel insignificant and we're needing another person to fill what's missing inside. So if you want to have secure, healthy relationships, then we start off with that premise and really take full ownership of the wounds that led us here. Which is very scary to do, which is extremely, when I look at my last relationship where I was in complete paralysis of fear, leaving my chiropractic profession to come and start speaking and teaching. I didn't have full self-confidence in myself. I met somebody who gave me that confidence and was kind of like the wind beneath my wings. And so unconsciously, I, from a wounded place, used her to fill what was missing inside. She had a similar kind of insignificant wound, which was she, had a really rough past, shady past in sex work and, exotic dancing. And so her insignificance was and survival need was met when she met me. And so, but this was kind of unconscious. And the funny thing is that people, while you're in it, you can't see it. But when you're on the outside looking in, it's totally obvious. It's like why, when you watch your friends get into relationships and you can totally see the hidden agendas behind it, right? But to own it, this is why it's so difficult. This is why. And to take responsibility and ownership of your wounding, that you've been leading the whole relationship with this wounding. And I don't want to use toxic feminine, toxic masculine. Let's change the wording from toxic to wounded.
I like
And
that.
pardon me?
I really like that.
Yeah, instead of calling it toxic feminine, toxic masculine, let's just call it what it actually is it's wounded, because we behave this way. We show up objectifying the other person. We show up having this hope of a knight in shining armor to rescue us from these wounds. And it's kind of like a rite of passage to get into marriage, and realize that the fantasy that you were hoping to get from that other person didn't exist. And there's this deep, painful kind of, how do I put it, uh, explosion that happens when you realize that that person is not going to ever fill that role properly, and now it's my turn, regardless of whatever however they're showing up, to go in and take full ownership of it. So really it starts by going inside and getting really good at identifying our hidden agendas and being very honest about it. The biggest obstacle to this is the ego that does not want to allow these shadow parts of us any room to breathe, because we've worked so hard to not, to not allow these parts. We've worked so hard to keep them in hiding. And so if we don't really get good at identifying it's what I call dancing with your dark passenger, taking these shadow, selfish kind of unconscious motives and making them conscious, if we don't bring them to light, give them permission, and to share them, then there's no chance of creating a healthy relationship. And we're going to get triggered constantly and argue about the content, but the context at the underlying the entire relationship is unaddressed. So it's really powerful place to start, is understand the context of how I was leading, how I lead, how my wounded self leads in this dance.
I love that. I just someone popped in the chat a very specific question which might help us really hone in on some great valuable feedback, and I can totally relate to this one. One of the things that I loved about our work together is coming out of the major relationship of my life at the time. Everything about our coaching was entirely focused on me, because that was the one thing I could control. And so this particular question is about, how do you stand strong and resourceful when you feel continually challenged or triggered by someone in the past? And the way I can relate to this is, when you have spent a great time of your life with one person, there's often some habits or some tones that are set within your relationship that I have even found, with all of my coaching and resourcefulness, hard to break those habits. And so one of our listeners has asked, when she shows up with her ex-partner who she's co-parenting with, and he doesn't show up resourcefully or respectfully to her, she finds it very challenging to stay resourced in that moment. So maybe we could speak to that topic, because whether it's a person of the past or someone in your present, I know that this is going to be valuable.
Beautiful. So the question basically is, all right, I'm my ex-husband, ex-partner, we still have kids, we still have to be in each other's lives. But he triggers the shit out of me. How am I supposed to stay resourceful when it's like, in other words, what
if they're not showing up to the same level of let's rise above, how do you keep? Yeah,
exactly. First and foremost, that's a great question. This whole concept that, man, I wish that they would do the work as well. I wish they would grow up as well. Why do I have to be responsible? I don't know if you're sensing this as well, but the underlying tone, whenever people ask me questions, I'm always kind of getting the sense and the feel, even though they're not in the room, there's a sense and a feel based on the language, and the underlying beliefs are coming through. And what I'm getting and sensing, by the way, I read through people now through this work, I'm getting and sensing this deep sense of, why do I have to be the one to grow up? This person's a fucking asshole. He's showing up like a arrogant little teenager. Does that sound familiar? Hey, Kira.
Your words.
Does this sound familiar to you? Shh, I'm not saying nothing. What? How the fuck? Okay, now
By the way, everyone in the chat is going off. They're like hanging for the answer to this question. Everyone is resonating. And what's hilarious is the people that we're talking about are saying the exact same thing about us. So
Okay.
don't you find that interesting? Everyone's just pointing the finger.
Totally true. So what I'd invite you to do, if that's what you're feeling, this is part of, by the way, this is what I teach in my trainings with my clients. We have the overview experience coming up on our Sunday. So it's your Monday, early Monday morning. It's well worth it to come and join. If this is intriguing you and you want to learn more, this is where you go. When this is showing up, what I'm going to invite you to do right now, it's kind of like I'm going to guide you. It's not a meditation, but I just want you to relax your body for a moment while I guide you through this. If this is truly what's been triggering you, I teach people how to take the trigger and turn it into something. So let me do this for you right now. So I want you to look at that moment in your life where it's very recent, probably the last time when he drops off the kids and he makes a stupid comment and acts like a kid or isn't cooperating or acting, whatever. And you're going into this sense of, this feeling of, why don't they just grow up? Why do I have to be the adult? Why don't they just grow up? And this feeling that comes up, drop into the body, because you're looking for an answer up here in content, and the answer will never come there. The answer happens when you shift your context, and it happens.
Can I add context to this? For me, it's the overwhelming feeling when I'm faced generally with triggers with people, and I know some of the women will relate, is more, how can this person not see me? How can they not feel my intention? How are we playing at this level?
Exactly. Why is it that they're not seeing me, feeling me? Why can't they grow up? Why are they so narcissistic? Why are they so blind? Why are they so into their own thing and da 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 da? Why? There's two things happening. And this is what we teach in this. And this is the only way to freedom. First thing you have to do before we go into this is you got to ask yourself, what's the outcome you want? Now, the outcome your ego is gonna say is that I want them to finally see me and finally agree and get on my side of things. That's what your ego is gonna say. But the true soul intention that I want to invite you to create is, I want to actually be okay with me regardless of what their behavior is. I want to be I don't want my well-being, my sense of self, my sense of certainty about myself to be in any way tied to how they're behaving or not behaving, because that's true freedom. Any other thing that you try to go for, you're in bondage, you're a prisoner to another person's values, treatment of you, and you're not unstoppable, you're stoppable. Okay. So that's the first thing. Now, what you're saying, if that's true, if that's what you truly want, which I'm highly suggesting that become what you want, because that's what your functional adult inside of you says, then give yourself permission to kind of feel into this feeling that you just described. Why do I have to show up like this? Why can't they see my side for once? Why can't they why can't they grow up? Why do I have to be responsible? And now, if you allow yourself those feelings that are very painful and you surrender to them, and hopefully if you just kind of surrender and let yourself feel them fully, and realize as you go deep into curiosity about these feelings, you're going to notice a couple things. Number one, that these feelings aren't new. They're very familiar. In fact, if you were honest with yourself, you'll probably notice that you've had those from a very young age. So how old do you, the next question you want to ask is, while this whole song and dance, this little dance is going on between you and them, how old do you really feel? And if you just quiet the mind that wants to come, that goes into story. How do they do this? Why can't they see me? Why can't they see me? You just said it. Why can't they see me? You'll notice this is a repeated pattern from childhood.
And I know through the work that we've done together, that is my greatest trigger, which doesn't rest on one person. It's actually been my trigger through my entire life. And I remember even saying it to my parents as a teenager, you're not seeing me, you're not hearing me. Yeah.
Bingo. So now you've been introduced to the context.
Mm-hmm.
See, people call in asking me for all of this sense of advice. Oh, this is what's happening. And they're looking for an answer on the level of the content. What should I tell them to finally get them to see me? And there's no solution there. You don't have any control over that. The only control you have is to say, what outcome do I want? Well, I want them to always agree with me. Well, it's not. That's what your wounded child says inside of you. That's your 12-year-old speaking. I want mommy and daddy to see me. That's what your 12-year-old inside of you says. However, the functional adult inside of you says, really, other people's behavior and choices don't really reflect anything negative on me. And so the next part you want to ask yourself is, now that you see how old you were as a younger child, when he behaves this way, what am I making that mean about me? And you'll start to give yourself permission. Your ego won't see it. I don't know. It's about him. He didn't. No. Get past this ego defense mechanism, which is trying to prevent you from feeling that disgusting feeling inside. And you'll see that the answer is, I'm not even worthy of being listened to. I'm not important. I am insignificant. Beautiful. Good. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're examining the context. 12-year-old you feeling unimportant. So now here's what's happening. When you and your partner or ex or whatever, whoever just asked this question, whenever you guys are interacting, whatever you do and you bring up within him, whatever happens and however he behaves, brings up within you a 12-year-old self who feels unimportant. Now, what you don't understand is that there's an equal and opposite thing going on in his world. You're so triggered that you're the victim. By the way, anytime we get triggered into victimhood, we become narcissists. All of us do. Mm-hmm. The key component of the narcissist is the victimhood. This will be an aha for many of you, for many of you out there who are pointing fingers and who love to point fingers and throw labels on your partners and your ex. What kind of shocks most of the clients we work with is that, holy fuck, what I've been labeling him was actually labeling myself. Yes, mm-hmm. Exactly. Anybody, you'll notice they're playing victim as well. Anybody who really gravitates towards that identity of the victim is a red flag for the for narcissistic behavior. I'm not calling you narcissist. I'm not calling you that. I'm just and I'm not invalidating you, and I'm not blaming the victim. I'm just bringing up a potential blind spot that when you don't observe and you don't acknowledge, keeps you perpetually stuck in the same cycle of trigger, not knowing that you're basically in a prison you're in a prison with the key in your own pocket. Mm-hmm. So how do we get ourselves out? Well, we get ourselves out. And by the way, many people, what I've noticed, majority of people, I would say 80% out there, probably not your audience, because you have to have a little bit of, your audience has a little bit of a desire for self-awareness. Mm-hmm. So majority of the people don't have the capacity to own the part of them that, that is realizing that they're showing up, the way they're showing up is triggering their partner's wounded child. And you
can't create change without that. I just want to say radical responsibility, radical self-reflection is the doorway to change. And until you're ready to take ownership of that, change is very difficult, if not impossible.
That's why when people work with us, I do an interview and I ask them some probing questions to see if they're the type of person that wants to just emotionally dump and play their victim story, or they're actually like, okay, I recognize I've been telling my story. I want to heal, which means I don't want somebody to just support me in my own story.
Mm-hmm.
So when you can acknowledge that you yourself, based on your unconscious behavior, is also triggering your partners, and you can see it's not your fault, but you're also at part the cause of his wounded behavior, you now have a doorway to open up to resource yourself, that 12-year-old girl who felt not seen and not heard. And with the right tools of becoming trigger proof, you resource that younger part of you unto the functional adult, and then show up, and you now start to see their behavior that's triggering you. It's not about you and your insignificance anymore. It's
Mm-hmm.
That's the story you're making up. What you realize on the other side of it is that the behavior that they're bringing up that's triggering you is actually wounded behavior, and it's caused by what you're unconsciously bringing up for them, not your fault. But you get to see the dynamic, and you get to see the drama triangle, that you're not a victim to this perpetrator that needs some sort of a hero, like a coach, a guide, another man to come and rescue you from. If you don't, you're stuck in this perpetual cycle of perpetrator, victim, and rescuer until you realize you're the victim, but you're also the perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, then you get to be the rescuer to yourself. And now that when the trigger comes up, it doesn't spin you out. You see right through it. You see your innocence, and you see the innocence of this person you once saw as your perpetrator, and then you're free. And this is what we show you how to do at our, at the overview experience, and we show you literally how to walk you through those steps.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so, what's some practical things? Because a lot of that takes time and self awareness, and major shifts can happen in a moment with the right coaching and guidance, for sure.
Totally.
But we are human, and I know for myself, as much as I have experienced this, there are times where I fall into that trap of reactivity. Do you have some practical tips, whether it's how you start your day or in the moment when you can feel yourself about to be triggered and react in a way that is like a 12-year-old, or I would say more like a 3-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
but
Totally.
you can feel yourself playing that low too. But what can you do in that moment? There's a space right before you react. Do you have some tips that people can put into practice?
Yeah, this is a practice. Well, through our trainings, we get you present to those younger parts of you. So you just said a 3-year-old part of you. I brought up, I don't know why, because based on her question, I don't know why the age of 12 came up, but I trust it. So your little 12-year-old is inside. I want you to imagine that you're not a single entity. You are a conglomeration of a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, different parts of you within your shadows, what we call them. Your wounded child is part of your shadows, that are following you around. And that when you're triggered, it's actually those parts of you are being activated. So if you can pause and go into your breath, and then give yourself permission to feel all of it. It's okay to feel. It's safe to feel anger. I'm allowed to feel anger. I'm I'm permitted to feel. I give myself permission to feel it. What happens is you allow yourself to feel the anger, then you'll realize underneath the anger is something deeper. There's shame, there's guilt, there's betrayal, there's abandonment. And so this is the most difficult part, and it takes skill and practice. And so you might not want to do this on your own, but finding a guide to help hold space while you actually feel the emotion underneath the anger, and give full permission. The emotion is coming up so that it can leave, but the problem is we've invalidated our emotions throughout our entire lives saying only happy emotions, good vibes only, positive vibes only, because we've been taught don't cry, you better not shout, you better not pout, like there's constantly a gaslighting, an invalidation, an intolerance to your expressing of emotions that you've now conditioned yourself to stuff them down. So that was my son screaming over there. He just my 6-month-old son. Rah! He doesn't hold back. And so what you're here to learn is how to elegantly and gracefully allow yourself the permission to feel everything that you've once invalidated. When you do, emotions come up like waves and they move through you. You allow yourself to have the tears, you allow yourself to have the guilt, you allow yourself to have the betrayal, and sometimes you get a lot better, and after you do this you get better at feeling them. So start to live by and adopt the principle that it's not about feeling better. Stop trying to feel better. When I stopped trying to feel better, my life completely changed because I started getting better at feeling whatever I was feeling and allowing it. And instead of denying it, rejecting it, suppressing it, or pretending like it's not there. And whatever I resist will persist. So if I can just allow myself to feel it and allow it to move through my body, now I have an ability to regulate, because the part of me that gives permission is my higher self, capital S. And your problems are solved by capital SU. But if you don't allow your emotions, you're suppressing them, you're denying parts of yourself, and you're not having access to capital SU. So the key component is the spiritual practice, relationships, making it a spiritual practice, career, spiritual practice, to access your higher self, which gives permission for whatever emotion to come through you.
Beautiful. Well, I feel like we have delivered so much gold already. The chat is going off, and your dad.
Really?
I feel like
I don't see any of the questions here.
Yes, you can go back and have a look after. But we've had lots of chats in the past, and there's just so many directions that we can go on. And I feel like this is a practice that is really a life practice. And I definitely want to bring you to this space as a regular guest. And so, what would be great in the chat, if there's some specific topics that our audience would like us to address in future, then that would be really helpful for us so that we can really meet those needs. But is there anything that you really wanted to deliver value on today before we wrap up?
Yeah, the key component, the key blind spot that I wanted to share with you on regulating your emotions so that you can feel safer in your body, and then create this sense of safety and security in the relationships, particularly in parenting. This is the most important reason why I'm choosing to teach this, is because I want to help break. I'm a cycle breaker. I'm breaking these cycles in my family. I put my hand up and I bore across, is that my parents don't have access to this work. I'm doing this work to break the cycle into the next generation, heal, to prevent my son from having the same kind of shames and guilts and anxieties and self-judgments and lack of self-trust that I did, and also to honor my parents for the journey as well. So this work is about transforming these family dynamic cycles and systems that are not your fault. You had no clue. The first half of life is a giant mistake. You have no idea. You have no clue that you're part of systems that are like emotional and spiritual, really, jail cells that are constantly having you doubt yourself, doubt your worth, doubt your value. And all of it's an illusion if you're willing to go and heal your attachment wounds. And if you can just really, if we could make this a priority, is healing the attachment wounds that have me showing up very reactive, self-blaming and self-critical, then we don't have to have our children show up with the exact same patterns, because they're going to, whatever's unresolved in me is going to get downloaded and my son's going to deal with it. That's just the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to uh, really stress how important it is for you to make your own healing of your ancestral wounds that weren't your fault uh, the utmost priority. The
Mm-hmm.
other side of this is your self-worth, your self-confidence, your self-security, and that's where your wealth and your relationships come. They're just a projection and a manifestation of how you feel about yourself, and how you feel about yourself all has to do with nothing that's your fault. It's just the attachment traumas that you were raised in. And so when you make becoming trigger proof the training your priority, your addictions go down, your relationships transform, healing happens, you connect to purpose, you have value within yourself. And it's not easy, but not doing it is downright unbearable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
so
I
I'm just
agree. I
encouraging
agree.
people.
And when you
I'm
feel
just
that freedom, there's no other alternative, right? I think we
Yeah.
have our next topic. I've had several people say they want to know more of what a positive relationship looks like. So I think we'll delve into that in the next interview. Final
Okay.
question. Someone has asked, and I think it's a great question because I think this really does come up a lot, is this sounds amazing, but it also sounds hard. What would you say to
Yes.
that?
I would say you are 100% correct on both counts. It is definitely amazing, and it's definitely very difficult. It's like climbing a mountain. Loving yourself isn't easy, but the work it takes to face your shadows, it's very, very difficult. But you know what's more difficult? Living another 3 months, 6 months, 1 year of your life, not being able to look in the mirror and say, I love you. That's even more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Or you want to know what's even more difficult? Showing up in relationships, constantly second guessing and judging and doubting yourself, and wondering if you're actually worthy of love. You know what's even more difficult? Watching your children go into similar relationship dynamics you prayed that they never would. That's going to be very difficult. Knowing that had you knowing that had your parents just done the difficult work and invested in themselves to heal their early attachment wounds, that your life experience would be different. But you know why they didn't? Not only did they not know, but also it's very difficult. And now this is a moment where you're called on to do something difficult, which is amazing, but it's really difficult. And in order for you to help you on that, really consider what life would be like if you don't do it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. The rewards are definitely well worth it. I think that's a really powerful note to end on. Please let our audience know where they can find you.
Yeah, if you can grab that link right there in the
Yep.
thing, there's two places. Number one, I have a Facebook group called Trigger Proof. In fact, those of you who just asked, what does a healthy relationship look like? I literally last week did a training that's called What a Secure Relationship Looks Like. I literally did a training in that group. So if you join that Facebook group, what's going to happen is you have an opportunity to drop your email in. And if you drop your email when you sign up for the group, you're going to get a free training that's 90 minutes long. Normally I charge, it's just $97. You get it for free for 48 hours, where you get to see literally the steps that you need to go through in order to become a master of your emotionally bulletproof or trigger proof. Because when you do, your relationship will change. That people will be like, oh my gosh, like, what have you done with my husband? I don't recognize him. Or like, my wife is a completely different person in 4 weeks, right? How did they do that? By following these steps. And I show you, I outline it in that training. So it's there. Just go ahead and join that group and put your email in, and then scroll down and watch what a secure relationship feels like. And then those of you who are actually ready to do the work, because a Facebook group is great, this interview is amazing, but tomorrow you're just going to go back to the exact same thing. Sorry, it's just the habit of your nervous system. It's your identity. You got to actually show up and invest and do the work with us. And that's the overview experience. The link is right there as well. If you could drop that in, that's on. You just it's a place to get started in working these tools. It's a 5-hour training we do early Monday morning in Australia.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for spending your time here. You're over in Canada. What time is it there now?
It's almost 6 p.m. dinner time.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Well, easy for you to join us on a regular basis.
Anytime.
So nice to be
this conversation.
Yeah, me too. It's so great to be working with you again. And yeah, the audit, you definitely have to go check out the chat because we've added a lot of value today.
Okay, great.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have an amazing day. We will be uploading this to YouTube and other platforms, and make sure you go over and follow Nima on social media because he adds so much value every day. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.